talk about Bitcoin, especially from a technical perspective. This is the 9th ever Bitcoin Plus Plus, the 4th one that we've ever done in Austin. Started this project in June 2022 here in Austin, same time as Consensus. Consensus is no longer in Austin, but Bitcoin Plus Plus is still standing, which is pretty exciting. But this is the first ever Bitcoin Plus Plus that is focused on talking about Mempools and transaction relay and mining pools. So everything that goes into building a block. I think a few people were a little surprised that this was such an interesting and contentious topic, but excited to have all of you here to show what a lot of interesting problems and challenges I think there are in terms of getting transactions into blocks, etc. So I'm going to give a little kickoff talk today, and then we'll have a short 15-minute break and then go into the content. Very excited to have some very wonderful developers and speakers here to share what they're working on. So thank you for showing up to talk, to listen to what they have to say and participate in the conversations that we hope to have here in Austin this week. Here's a couple of the goals of what I hope we'll accomplish over the next 3 days, that developers and builders will come together to share what they're working on. You'll learn about some of the challenges that we're trying to accomplish or trying to overcome with code, and through maybe what progress has been made so far on improving Bitcoin and the way that we transact. Hopefully we'll also have some time to build some cool stuff together. And then finally, of course, I'm hoping that everyone not argues, but grows Bitcoin as an open source community together. So again, thank you all for being here. While I'm giving some thanks, I want to give a big shout out to our 2 title sponsors, NYDIG and HRF. Without our sponsors, events like these wouldn't be possible. So thanks to both of them for contributing to keeping the dialogue about Bitcoin development open and happening. Okay, so we're talking about Mempools. What does that mean? So a lot of you have probably transacted with Bitcoin on chain. This means that you have to get your transaction from yourself to a miner. Mempools are an interesting object in Bitcoin because they tend to kind of become an area of the commons, right? It's where a lot of people need to sort of work together in a decentralized fashion to make sure that things happen, like transactions ending up in the right place. It's also, I like to say, one of the biggest, freest markets in the world, the market for block space. So by sending your transaction to the mempool, you're participating in one of the world's freest and most open auctions, where anyone who owns Bitcoin is allowed to place a bid, and anyone who mines Bitcoin is allowed to accept that bid and put it into a block. So this is a really cool and interesting, I think, part of the process of living in an open society. Unfortunately, with like the commons and, anytime you have the opportunity to make profit, sometimes we end up in places where we're not really sure how that particular marketplace or the rules of the pool should be governed. So we end up in maybe some sword fights or duels about which which transactions my block is going to include. Some of these, sometimes maybe it gets a little contentious online. But at the end of the day, I think, it's good to remember that I think Bitcoin works as an anarchic system, which means that a lot of how Bitcoin gets developed is in a decentralized way. People do what they think is best to a certain extent, and, blocks keep getting made, which I think is the important thing, and people are still able to transact in a peer-to-peer way. So as developers, we do our best to reach consensus among ourselves. Some of that includes education, which is what I hope we're going to spend a lot of time on this week, talking about how the processes work, what people are working on, what they're concerned about, and sort of the opportunities for continuing to grow and improve Bitcoin, transacting with Bitcoin as one of the freest and most open marketplaces. And with the kind of what is the goal of all of this? Well, Bitcoin was invented to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, right? So as long as 2 people are able to come together and exchange value, I think Bitcoin is a success. And what we're building on, I think, is a pretty successful project. So I'm excited for all of you to be here today to continue talking about, all the interesting protocol proposals and improvements that we're making to make the mempool and transaction relay and block inclusion a more, continuing to be a process that is open to all at whatever price they choose to pay, etc. Great. Okay, so that's my kickoff. Here's what to expect over the next 3 days. So today and tomorrow, we're going to have some talks and workshops, lectures, and debates. Those will be in this room is the planarium or the main stage. There's also a second stage called the pull-in stage, which will be all the way at the other end in room 1. Workshops will be in room 2, so that's farther to the left if you exit the room. Then on Thursday night, tomorrow, we're going to kick off a hackathon. So we won't be doing talks and workshops anymore. Instead, we'll be all working on hackathon projects. So you'll be making a team, you'll be coming together to work on some code projects, and then hopefully presenting to show off what you've accomplished in 24 hours. It is a short time to work on stuff, but we're really excited about everyone participating. Right, so who participates in the hackathon? The answer is everyone participates in the hackathon. So looking forward to seeing what all of you have to put together and offer. We'll be doing the kickoff for the hackathon on Thursday at the end of the day, so look forward to that. This is the first year that we're trying something called expo style presentations. So yeah, this will be the first year that we'll be giving people an opportunity to show off your project in kind of a science fair way. Again, we'll have more information about that during the hackathon kickoff, which will be tomorrow at 4:30. Great. I have a few quick announcements. Here's a good overview of where the rooms are in case you have any questions. They're supposed to have little agendas outside of them. I'm working with the venue to make sure that those get put back up. So I apologize they're not there currently. But the main room is where we are right now. If you exit and go to the left, the first room you come to will be just a work room. If you need to take calls or hang out, work on a project, that's a good spot to hang out. Room 2 is the workshop room, and then room 1 is I'm calling the pooling room, which is the second stage with talks, more talks, etc. Lunch is going to be served around noon to 1. We do it outside, picnic style. So in order to get to lunch, you'll need to exit the building, go down the stairs, and then head out straight across the street over to the park. Last year, this is where they were serving lunch. This year, we've got some signs, so look for signs to figure out where to go pick up your sandwiches. It's provided by the conference. So again, thank you to our sponsors for being able to feed all the devs. We really appreciate the support for the developer ecosystem. Just as another reminder, people really value their privacy in Bitcoin. So if you're going to take photos, please do not post. Well, first, please don't take photos, or if you do, make sure you get permission of the people in the photo, especially if you our first ever Oxford debate series, which will be moderated by that's going to start at 5:30 tonight. So a little bit after we concluded talks and workshops for today, it'll happen in this room. I think we'll have space for everyone, but we might not. So hopefully we'll have a Q&A period inside if we're not able to fit everyone in here. So we're super excited about being able to have a formal conversation around an interesting topic in Bitcoin, and today's topic will be about filters, or Opperturn, sorry. Talking about Opperturn. Great. So for more conversations and more announcements, please join the conference Telegram. You can get it through this QR code. I'll give you a second to do that. One of the reasons that I really want everyone on the Telegram is because we're doing, after the debate tonight, we're going to be doing a pool party as the opening night party. I'm very excited about this because it's also going to be the first ever block template tourney, which I will talk through the rules too. And you'll need to be on the Telegram so you can find the sign up sheet for joining the team. Here you can see I've got no, still going. Okay. So part of the conference Telegram, again, I'll be posting in there a link so you can join a team. We're gonna have teams of 3. Some of you may be aware of my other game that I've made called the Bitcoin LARP. For doing a Bitcoin LARP but Mempool edition, and it will involve getting in the pool and getting wet. So if you forgot your swimsuit, please visit our plug print shop over in the corner. We've got a couple of swimsuits on sale. They're Bitcoin themed and available for Satoshis, so you can be equipped to win the gold in the block template tourney. Okay, I still see a couple people taking pictures here. Hopefully that worked. Okay, we'll get it out if it's not. Right, so Block Template Tourney, I think, is brought to you by Layer 2 Labs. So thank you to Layer 2 Labs for sponsoring this. It's a few blocks away. Again, you'll need a team of 3. And we'll be in the pool with transactions, trying to find transactions in the pool that you'll put in your block. And then when the block gets made, you'll find out how many points you made, and then compete against all the teams, etc. So good opportunity to practice your best block construction algorithms in real life with some friends. Great. Okay, so that's all I have for you this morning. We're gonna have a short 15-minute break for people to grab coffee and maybe some snacks. And if we've got 2 other great workshops that are gonna start at 10:30, so we'll be back in about 15 minutes here, starting with our main programming, and then with some awesome workshops and talks in the other room. So thank you for everyone for being here, and looking forward to a really great next 3 days. Cool. Thank you.
And show support for your favorite Bitcoin client, you can find these hats for sale. Bitcoin Core, the Bitcoin Knots one, there are more coming soon. Please check the website or the store. Welcome back to Bitcoin Plus. Thank you, Nifty.
not appreciated at conferences. So I'm very, very excited to finally have a conference around Mempool transaction relay. And Mempool is all about using past information to try to fortune tell. So I thought I'd do a little bit of that to open this conference. So as we know, in the beginning of time, Satoshi had this idea where we could have censorship-resistant money. And the way to achieve that is to have this public, permissionless network that anybody can join. Your peers are anonymous, anybody could be an originator of a payment, and anybody could be a miner. We use proof of work as consensus. There's no authorization, there's no staking involved. So if you are unhappy with the transactions that are being mined on the Bitcoin network, you can join as a miner and earn rewards in proportion to your hash rate. Cool. And was there a mempool in Satoshi's original code? Yes. It was called map transactions, and it had no memory limits, which was a great idea by Satoshi. And there were policies around fees. So actually the first 100 transactions in a block were free, unless they were over 10,000 bytes or they had dust. And if so, there was a minimum fee rate of 10,000 sats per byte, which was, of course, later lowered. Satoshi also knew that there's going to be script that encodes many possible spending conditions, but it's very useful to have a standard template for making payments. So in the beginning, the only standard templates were pay to pub key and pay to pub key hash. Cool. And very early on, Satoshi also introduced this concept of priority, which was later called BTC days destroyed, in which transactions are weighted, can be prioritized based on the value of the inputs being spent times the number of confirmations of the inputs being spent. And so in effect, older transaction spending older coins get priority over transaction spending newer coins. And of course, this isn't just Satoshi trying to get his transactions in faster. It was an attempt to try to limit the amount of spam on the network using some kind of scarce resource, right? It's very difficult to have old coins. You can't really fake that. And for a long time, these priority transactions didn't need to pay fees, and priority eventually fully went away in 2017, but in the early days, priority was a very big factor. And this points us to one of the most important design goals in looking at mempool and transaction relay code, which is that it's very, very exposed to denial of service, right? You are a node on the network, you're connected to random peers that they don't have reputation or identity by design, and they are sending you transactions that may or may not be valid Bitcoin transactions. And it can be potentially very expensive for you to figure out, is this hay or is it a needle? And so very early on, some new standardness rules were introduced in addition to consensus. So, while this very, very large transaction might be a consensus valid transaction, it will cost us too much compute to try to verify that. So maximum transaction size in consensus was a megabyte, but in standardness was 100 kilobytes. And there's also a limit on the number of signature operations that you can have on a standard transaction because signature verification is particularly expensive. And as more wallets were developed and more people were using Bitcoin, new eyeballs were on the repo, there were a lot of issues that were discovered, like malleability. And given these problems that can either cause users to lose money or waste money, for example, in producing dust outputs that are also not particularly nice for the network to have to maintain, there were guardrails put up in the form of standardness rules to kind of shape wallet behavior, as well as protect users from bad wallet practices, for example. And as the space of acceptable scripts and types of spending conditions expanded, more templates were added in order to accommodate the new use cases, but also try to enforce best practices. So pay to script hash was around this time, and it's like, okay, you can have arbitrary scripts for spending conditions, but best way to do that is for the sender to send to the hash of the script, and for example. And these were both consensus, like they were figuring out consensus and policy. But it is worth noting that around this time, it was very difficult to get a non-standard transaction mined.
And then the final example I have down here, which is still very relevant today, is preserving upgrade hooks through policy. So if we have, say, a NOP that we want to ascribe a new consensus rule to in the future, or a new witness version, well, there were no witnesses at this time, but new witness version, upgradable things that we might create a soft fork for, as in restrict the space of valid transactions. We don't want it to be the case that at that time, every single person has to update at the exact same time. Otherwise, you might have newly invalid transactions in your mempool. For example, if you're a miner, you mine them, or if you are a node, you accept them. And so we discourage upgradable fields in policy to preserve the ability to do soft forks on them later. Okay, so past the kind of 2014, 2015 point, people are like using Bitcoin and blocks are full, and there's quite a bit of traffic, transaction relay traffic on the network. And so people need a way to communicate to their miners their time preference via fees. So around this time, ancestor descendant package tracking was added to Mempool, and we got things like CPFP, child pays for parent, and replace by fee as a way for you to fee bump your transaction. And if you read the release notes around this time, 0.14, 0.15, a lot of the major features are centered around this incentive compatibility assessment and giving users the ability to estimate fees based on their mempool and bump fees. Around this time is also when people are going to ask, hold on, like non-mining nodes don't get paid. So like, I get why miners care about, let's say, RBF, because they can replace a transaction with a very similar one that essentially pays more fees. That makes sense, it's incentive compatible, but nodes don't get paid, so why do they care about fees? And I think this is a sub-question of why should nodes have mempools at all? Like, is it just an altruistic service that you provide to the network? Like, it's great to have censorship-resistant payments, but what's in it for me? And there's an answer to this. Mempools are just caches, basically. It's just like your UTXO set cache or your script cache. It's a way for you to kind of hear about transactions or portions of blocks before they are mined, so that when this block comes out, your caches are warm, you don't need to download them again, you don't need to validate them again, you kind of just do a relatively small amount of work to update your chain tip and go ahead and pass that block to your neighbors. And so for an individual node, it is worthwhile for you to run with a mempool, even if you're not particularly interested in fee estimation and receiving payments and knowing about them before they're confirmed, which is also very important or very useful. And at a network level, the effects of very warm caches like compound to produce very fast block propagation. Like 2016 is when compact block relay came about, and that means that instead of taking multiple seconds for the whole network to hear about a block, it can be very, very short in comparison. And that means fewer stale blocks, that means fewer reorgs for everybody to deal with, and just better reliability and safety for everybody. And so today, even today, compact block reconstruction rate is probably a really good metric of network health. And of course, like, just to bring it back to the beginning and like kind of the whole point of this, when everybody runs with mempools, it means we get this really awesome censorship resistant payment network. Cool. So I was looking for, okay, when was the last time or what are the difference between policy and consensus? When was the last time we added a policy restriction for the purpose of blocking transactions? And kind of the malleability policy changes that I mentioned a few slides back became a little less relevant after SegWit. And so while they were originally proposed as a soft fork, that was withdrawn, but they still are policy rules, and that represents a kind of divergence that still exists today. Another one is, I think the last one I could find was 7 years ago in 2018. This very innocuous PR titled Several Transaction Standardness Rules, which did a few things, among them changing the minimum standard transaction size to 82 bytes. And it's kind of under the guise of like, it's like normal payments are not smaller than this. So it's kind of in like the templates bucket of like normal payments aren't going to be bigger than this. So let's just set it to be a small, the limit to be 82. And this was, of course, later revealed as a way to try to stop 64-byte transactions from being relayed because they can break SPV proofs. And the 64-byte transaction thing is proposed as a consensus rule. It's still not in consensus today. But I think it's worth noting that a lot of the places where policy and consensus diverge really are on things that we've collectively kind of uncontroversially agreed should be network rules, but we just haven't really managed to do a soft fork for them yet. Cool. So around this, I would say, like, as Lightning and L2s matured or existed, fee bumping kind of graduated from being a user convenience kind of feature to a security issue, because kind of the value that L2s can bring with privacy and scalability and all these features still retain their security based on this premise of like, okay, well, we've enumerated the spending paths. You and your counterparty don't need to trust each other. And if your counterparty tries to cheat you, you have before this time lock to respond. Otherwise, like you have this time lock, right? And so as long as you can get your transaction confirmed, your response confirmed, you're okay. But that means that if you can't get your transaction confirmed, that you might lose, the HTLC amount, for example. So as like anchor outputs became a common way for adding fees for the purpose of kind of pushing transactions along more urgently, and pinning attacks became a real concern. Greg and I have spent a lot of time in the last 4 years coming up with ways to prevent pinning. And I think it's an issue that has been trivialized by many people, but is really important. And you can kind of think of it as a way, as like a new template spanning multiple transactions for the purpose of making sure that pre-signed transactions can still get fee bumped, even if there's no way to re-sign the transaction that you did with your counterparty. And as I'm given to understand that Greg is going to give a whole talk on this afterwards, so I'm not going to talk too much about this. Cool. And so this kind of history of Mempool, you can see gradually the Mempool plays less and less of a role of controlling what transactions are mined, and more comes into its role as a public marketplace for people to bid for block space. And I mentioned kind of what effects, what benefits you get as an individual node. And while we can't really expect Mempools to be homogeneous across the network, there are clearly very, very powerful benefits at the network level when all Mempools are running a certain way, or Mempools are running in a different way. And so defaults have been fought over, and config options for Mempool have been fought over since 2014, and maybe even before. And so this is not real data, by the way, I made it up. But I was complaining to FanQuig about this, and yeah. And I kind of, at the heart of these Mempool debates is like, what is Mempool for? What is its role? Like, it's very easy for us to understand what the pros and cons are for an individual node. And it's very easy to understand like the benefits we get if everybody does the same thing. But incentive, like, how do we reconcile the fact that users have control over their own nodes with like what is good for the network? And so I found it very relieving. Some people might find it very depressing that Mempool has always been a really contentious part of the code base to work on. But I think it is nonetheless very worth having those discussions. Okay, so how are we doing today? We have no shortage of technical challenges to work on. Pinning is a really difficult problem. I think we've made a lot of progress with truck and one parent, one child relay and whatnot. But like the RBF rules themselves kind of suck. They're not very incentive compatible, and fixing them is really hard. It kind of requires an entire mempool rewrite. And so it's a very interesting place to work right now, and again, I think it's very worthwhile to work on it. But fee bumping, like outside of Mempool, if you're working on wallets, particularly kind of enterprise scale wallets, fee management is really hard, like batched RBF and like trying to do good coin selection to do your CPFPs is not very fun. And so like an economist, I think, would look at a lot of the problems we see today and say, okay, like this marketplace is not very efficient. And so what happens when you are trying to manage like these lanes of traffic and you're not quite succeeding? Well, somebody is going to dig a tunnel to go past them. And as we see, there are a few notable transaction direct to miner submission services like the Mempool Accelerator, like Marathon Slipstream service that allow people to do this, to bypass the standardness rules that they find not fun, or just like give things to miners and pay them directly out of band to just get this thing over with, so you don't have to manage the fee bumping thing. And this is not to say that this is evil or that they shouldn't make money doing this, but there are real harms to the network. And let's play out a scenario. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. But okay, like how are we doing right now? Like the good news is there's not a lot of out-of-band traffic happening. This was a tweet by Mononot a couple days ago showing that in the past year, really only a few hundred non-standard transactions were mined. This is not including all of the standard transactions that went through accelerators and stuff. But this is like kind of not that significant compared to the subsidy, for example. Or what could happen. But the bad news is we already see the effects of what this does to compact block relay. So Mempool full RBF was a really good example. There was all kinds of fights about what the defaults should be, and so it was kind of left as is. But after some time of having the Mempool full RBF option, this research done by 0xB10C showed that nodes, first of all, that nodes running without Mempool full RBF have horrible compact block reconstruction rates compared to ones that do run with it. And you can kind of extrapolate that from that, seeing that, okay, miners are running with full RBF. And so that default needed to be switched. But I would argue that if it gets to this point, it's a little bit too late. And we really should be responding to network conditions faster than that. So where can this go? It's very understandable why miners would want to sign up for direct accelerators or slipstream type services, right? They're like, look, we are a business. We want to make more money, and we can make more money doing this. And you can imagine like a lot of L2s or roll-ups or whatever, or like we're tired of being pinned, or like in extreme situations or day-to-day, we need these non-standard transactions. So we're just gonna sign up for this service and like set up this relationship either just in case or in the worst possible way, like we just use it all the time because this is so much easier than having to deal with the public network. So maybe like a rollup has some like MEV in it, and that leaves room for some startup with like a few people to say like, oh, there's money to be made. Like we will build your block templates for you, and like we'll sequence it in a way that like maximizes your revenue, and we will take a cut of that. And at this point, like you can imagine why miners are like, oh, well, like I could build the block templates myself, but I make a lot more money if I just have them build it for me. So like, I'm gonna go ahead and do that because I'm a business and I am trying to make money. Similarly, you have big exchanges and batch payment processors. Maybe they do like 30, 40, or some huge percent of the economic activity on the network. And they're like, look, we do so many transactions. This is just such a pain to deal with like fee bumping or whatever. It's so much easier to just pay the accelerator service to figure this out for us and make sure that all our transactions get confirmed on time. And then at some point, I think if you have a large part of the economic activity signed up for the service and a huge amount of the miners also getting their block templates from the service, and they say like, oh, like I don't have access to a large part of the fee revenue that I could get unless I sign up for this, you've kind of lost the censorship resistant payment network. And I'm not saying that any, like, if you notice in this progression, like nobody was malicious, like nobody was trying to destroy Bitcoin or like trying to censor things. They were just like either lazy or just being economically rational, right? No malicious activity has to happen for us to end up this way. I'm not saying this is like for certain going to happen, but it's a very easy path for us to go down. So what should we do? Like all of them have this like theme of devs were lazy and then people were economically rational. A lot of these things are preventable. So I think the work that's being done in mempool policy in Bitcoin Core, for example, around fee bumping efficiency, like making sure this auction, this public auction space is efficient to squeeze out any private auctions that may or may not happen, is really, really important for preserving the decentralized network. And incentive compatibility should be something that every node on the network is able to reason about easily. Not just miners or like these high frequency flashbot type startups. Don't build Mevy things, please. And I'm given to understand Matt will give a talk about this later. And we should drop the policies that don't actually do anything except hinder block propagation. And this isn't all of them. It's like quite few of them really. But I argue that it's important to drop them. And just saying, like if there's empty block space, it means that there isn't enough adoption. Long term, as with the examples of the very few standardness restrictions that have been introduced in the past like 10 years, if it's really something that's so harmful to the network and everybody agrees is a bad idea, we should just make them consensus rules. Like 64-byte transactions should just be disallowed in consensus, or this SPV proof thing, like if it should be a consensus rule, it should be a consensus rule, basically. And long term, maybe this exogenous fees thing where you have to create a brand new transaction and pay fees for all the overhead for that new transaction aren't actually going to be sustainable in the long run. So maybe we might have to get rid of that. So my ending thought is don't give up on censorship resistant payments. It is going to be, because it always has been, quite contentious to decide what policy rules should be, but it's worth doing. And I think that's my last slide. Yes, thank you. Oh, yes, I think we have like 5 minutes for questions. 3 minutes. Yes.
You could use the headset mic now and we'll get the
Okay.
roaming mic.
All right.
It's okay.
Okay. Hello.
Cool. So full disclosure, I work at Mempool Space on the accelerator, but in your like worst case scenario, my assumption is that you're imagining that the person who's constructing these templates is going to get pressured and told you can't include these specific transactions, and that's where the censorship comes in. So if that is the case, would you not have like an accumulation of censored transactions which ultimately would accumulate to a point that a miner would say, well, actually, I'm going to build my own template and include those?
Yes. I think it's more that if you want to join as an anonymous miner and you don't want to sign up for this service, you are much less profitable because you don't have access to these things. Like if we are relying on people being ideological like miners and like losing money in order to do the censorship resistant thing, I don't think that is as robust as what we have today, which is if you want to make money and you're a miner, you just hook up to the public network and you're going to make hopefully just as much money in proportional to your hash rate as any other.